नमस्ते, आप सभी का स्वागत है आज की इस विशेष चर्चा में। जैसा कि आप जानते हैं क्रिसमस आने वाला है और ऐसे समय हमें यह आवश्यक है कि हम जानें कि भई ये क्रिश्चियनिटी, ये मसीहीवाद, ये है क्या? आप जानते हैं कि हमारी चैनल पर हमने इस्लाम का पूर्व पक्ष बहुत अच्छी तरह से जाना है, तो अब समय आ गया है कि हम इस मसीहीवाद या क्रिश्चियनिटी का भी पूर्व पक्ष जानने का प्रयास करें। और हमारे साथ है एक बहुत ही प्रबुद्ध लेखक कालावाई वेंकट जी। और मैं स्वागत कर रहा हूँ इस समय कालावाई वेंकट जी का। और आपने क्रिश्चियनिटी का बहुत अच्छी तरह से पूर्व पक्ष किया है। आपका स्वागत है वेंकट जी।
नमस्ते और स्वागतम संजय जी।
तो मैं ये जानना चाहता हूँ, आपने कुछ पुस्तकें लिखी हैं जिसमें से एक पुस्तक है हाउ हिंदू शुड लुक एट क्रिश्चियनिटी। तो आप हमें समझाएं कि ये धार्मिक दृष्टि से ये जो क्रिश्चियनिटी है ये क्या है? हम जानते हैं कि ये एक प्रोफेटिज्म है या मसीहीवाद है या मसीहावाद है। लेकिन इसके अतिरिक्त यह क्या है? देखिए, मैंने जो विश्लेषण थोड़ा-सा किया है अलग-अलग धर्मों का, और उसमें हमने उनको 3-4 मानकों पर, 3-4 स्टैंडर्ड्स, पैरामीटर्स पर उनको एनालाइज़ किया है। Such as uh, time, how the religions look at time,
Yeah.
that is eternal cyclical time and finite time, और एपिस्टेमोलॉजी, कॉस्मोलॉजी, लॉजिक। ये 4 मेन पैरामीटर्स हैं कि जैसे हमारा जो लॉजिक है वो बिल्कुल अलग है, बिकॉज दैट इज आइदर ट्राई वैल्यूड और फोर वैल्यूड लॉजिक। और ये लोग जो हैं वो अपने वो बाइनरी लॉजिक में चलते हैं, जो किताब में लिखा है वो सही है, बाकी सब गलत है। बहुत सिंपल।
Mhm.
तो अब हिंदुओं को इसे कैसे समझना चाहिए?
That's a very good question. So, to start with, why at all should a Hindu bother to know about Christianity? That's the very first question, right? So, then we'll come to what is the correct approach of understanding Christianity. But the first question is, why at all should a Hindu bother about Christianity?
जी।
So, uh, उसके लिए बहुत कारण है, तीन चार कारण है, but then I'll start with the very first one. The first reason is, whether we like it or not, Christians are not going to let us in peace, because their mission is
ओके।
to convert every
हुँ,
Hindu, okay,
अच्छा। हुँ,
and to replace Hinduism with Christianity, and to get us to proclaim their article of faith in Jesus. That's their goal, because this is something Jesus urges the Christians to do in the Bible. And that's why we have Christian missionaries around the world, not just today, but for centuries and centuries and centuries from the beginning of Christianity. So they are not going to leave us alone. And for them, it's not that you practice Hinduism, we practice Christianity, you live in peace. No, they want us to convert. They want to convert us. So if somebody is targeting us, we should at least know what is motivating them. If we don't, and if we just ignore, then we are going to concede more and more of ground to Christianity, like we did for Islam and others. You know, Pakistan and other places used to be Hindu once upon a time, or Buddhist, and now we lost all of those things. The difference is, if Islam entered India through the sword, entirely through sword, Christianity entered through the sword partially when the Portuguese took over the west coast, or even when the British came in to some extent, but mainly through uh, what we can call intellectual deceit. That's how Christianity enters India. So we need to know about that religion. That's number one reason. The second reason, I think, is uh, the dharmic view of reality and the dharmic view of spiritualism and Christianity cannot be reconciled with one another. Only one of them can be true, and but both of them cannot coexist. So, in other words, for a lot of people, this may sound like a very strange argument. Why am I making this statement? So, what is the word we use for uh, one of the common words we use in all of our Sanskrit literature is gyan, right? That's why you have jnana marga, and then attaining attaining jnana is the first step to self-realization and all of these things. That's the very beginning for us. And then we had our counterparts in what we can call the Greco-Roman world about 16, 17, 1800 years ago. So those were called the Gnostic people. Okay. So as you can see, the word jnana and the gnosis is spelled as Gnosas, and hence those people are called the Gnostics. So jnana and Gnostics were cognates. Both have the same root, both convey broadly the same meaning. That's why we find some commonality between the Platonic philosophy and the philosophy of the Upanishads, etc. So there was a tradition of seeking knowledge, seeking self realization, even among the Hellenic people or the Greco Roman people. And what did Christianity do? Christianity came and then imposed itself on those religions. It um suppressed, often violently, all the pagan religions. The burning of the Library of Alexandria is a good example of that. So that's how Christianity got rid of that. So, at some level, this is also a, a conflict between a system of knowledge, which Hinduism is, and a system of ignorance, as I'm going to make the case for that, which Christianity is. Okay. So we are in the 21st century. I think at any point in time, ignorance is not a good thing, and at any point in time, knowledge is a wonderful thing to pursue, and more so, I think, in the 21st century and beyond, because we are living in the world of knowledge, and we are living in the world where information and possessing the truth is going to be of paramount value. So it's very important to understand what Christianity is truly about. And then the third or the third reason why Hindus should understand Christianity is exactly because the way it has been repackaged, whitewashed, completely sanitized, and sold to Hindus. And most importantly, even some very, very great Hindus, our religious leaders, our political leaders, our intellectuals, they have not bothered to understand Christianity for what it is. And most of them have just gone ahead with the colonial propaganda about Jesus, about the Bible, etc. And they have propagated that. So, because of that, most of the time Hindus don't understand. Even if you say something critical of Christianity or about Jesus, their immediate retort would be, "Oh, by the way, Swami Vivekananda praised Jesus, or Prabhupada praised Jesus, or Sivananda Swami praised Jesus. Why are you attacking him? Do you know better than him, or better than those three people?" So, so the reason for that is, uh, most Hindus have not studied the Bible, have not studied the Christian history. They have very little familiarity with any of their philosophies or anything. And as a result of that, the false perception of Christianity, which the colonial rulers and others propagated, and which our own Swamijis and others reinforced, has actually led to a deep ignorance of Christianity among Hindus. At least that's not the case with Islam, because with Islam, Hindus, especially in the northern part of India, to some extent in the south as well, because the Islamic invasions happened all the way into up to Madurai in Tamil Nadu, but the north
Right.
a lot more. Okay, so especially the northwestern part of India or the eastern part of India, they all suffered tremendously, and hence the experience of having lived with Islam is etched deeply in the minds of Hindus. So even when they do not know the theology of Islam, they are not easily sold on a propaganda. If someone had to go and say that, oh, Muhammad was like Lord Sri Ram, okay, or he was like Krishna, most people would laugh at you even if they have not read the Quran or the Ramayana or the Bhagavad Gita even once. So, because they have this experience. Whereas Christianity entered through a different route. India had already been ruined by Islamic rule for more than close to a millennium, and that's when the Christians come into the country, and then the Industrial Revolution kicks in. So what we perceive as modernity started to happen in India under the British colonial rule, and that's when Christianity takes roots in India. So as a result, most Hindus, like a lot of other Asians, African, and others, subconsciously associate Christianity with modernity, with progress, with enlightenment, and all of these things, even though Christianity is not any one of these things. So I would say these are some of the reasons why we should study Christianity, uh, because that's going to be very instrumental for us to safeguard our own dharma.
ओके, दैट्स वेरी गुड पॉइंट मेड। मैं आपको इसी पे आई विल टेक यू फॉरवर्ड ऑन दिस, इसी पे बात करूंगा मैं।
Mhm.
सबसे पहले तो जो आपने कहा, एंड दिस इज माय एक्सपीरियंस आल्सो, कि इफ यू वांट टू अंडरस्टैंड एनीथिंग, जैसे जब
Right.
आई हैव अ फेयरली गुड अंडरस्टैंडिंग ऑफ इस्लाम, लेकिन वो जो अंडरस्टैंडिंग आई है वो पहले इस्लामिक हिस्ट्री जब पढ़ ली, उसके बाद में इट बिकेम वेरी इजी। इस्लामिक
Right.
हिस्ट्री आपने पढ़ ली तो आप फिर उसका जो है इस्लाम की ग्रोथ आप चार्ट कर सकते हैं। फिर दूसरी बात यह है कि उनकी जो 3 बेसिक बुक्स हैं, व्हाट इज़ द बेसिक शरिया,
Yeah.
तो एंड नॉट वेरी वॉल्यूमिनस, तो वो इट्स मच ईजियर इन दैट केस। लेकिन ना जो बाइबल है, अब वो बाइबल का ओल्ड टेस्टामेंट है जो कि जूडाइज्म से कॉमन है, और उसके बाद फिर उनका जो न्यू टेस्टामेंट है जिसमें दुनिया भर की बुक्स हैं, और वो भी उनकी अलग अलग जो क्रीड है, जो आपका कैथोलिक्स हैं उनकी बुक्स जो हैं वो अलग हैं, ऑर्थोडॉक्स से कुछ कॉमन है, कुछ कम है, कुछ ज़्यादा हैं, और उसके अलावा फिर प्रोटेस्टेंट्स में कुछ और है। तो ये बड़ा कॉम्प्लिकेटेड सा है, बिकॉज बाइबल इज
Right.
नॉट लाइक द कुरान विच हैज वन स्टैंडर्ड एडिशन।
Right.
तो पहले थोड़ा सा हमको बाइबल के बारे में, क्रिश्चियन हिस्ट्री के बारे में समझाइए, जिससे हम आगे
Sure.
इसका जो है
Sure.
वो अप्रिसिएशन कर सकें।
श्योर। साहब, ये जो चोरी का प्रोसेस होती है ना, उसमें थोड़ा टाइम भी लगता है। बिकॉज़
अच्छा।
बिकॉज़ Christianity had to start by stealing from Judaism first,
हम्म,
and then from pagan religions, okay, on the side. So they had to create more books, okay, so उसमें थोड़ा टाइम लगा। Then by the time Muhammad came, the process had been perfected. Okay, he had stolen from wherever he could, a little bit from Judaism, going back to more strict monotheism. He knew what to oppose in Christianity. He wanted to oppose the concept of Trinity in Christianity. So finally, this entire Chori process had been going on for 700 years or so by the time Muhammad comes. So he made it very simple. Okay, one book, easy to refute. Okay, so in the case of Christianity, it is a little bit more complicated. Like you said, there are, if you take the Protestant Bible versus the Catholic Bible, there are either 66 books for the Protestants and then 73 for the Catholics. However, out of those, 27 books are common to both, okay, which are the books of the New Testament. I think from our perspective, from a Hindu perspective, looking inside out, uh, it's these 27 books which are very critical, because these are the ones that tell the story of Jesus and lay the foundations of Christianity, everything. And these 27 books of New Testament become very pertinent to us. But New Testament never exists in a void. So it's only built on the foundation of Old Testament, because Old Testament prophesies the coming of the Messiah. And the New Testament comes and says, look, Jesus is the Messiah. He has already arrived. Okay. So from that point of view, Christians cannot negate the Old Testament. Okay. They cannot say Old Testament is not applicable to us. It's absolutely applicable. Okay. So everything from 10 commandments and all of those things, they base it on Old Testament narratives. The concept of original sin, they do so on the basis of Old Testament narratives. Okay. So because of all these things, Old Testament is equally important. But when we want to focus on,
This original sin, sorry to interrupt,
yeah,
the original sin is the sin of procreation, is it?
little bit more than that also. So
Hmm.
what it says is there is a talking snake that comes, okay, and then it talks to Adam and Eve, and then uh, finally, they come to become aware of their nakedness. Okay, they start covering themselves, and hence they are cursed. Okay, so इसमें एक चीज देखिए आप, from the Abrahamic point of view, everything came into existence when because of a talking snake. Okay, and everything will come to an end because of a talking tree or a talking rock in Islam. Okay, because in
Hmm.
Islam, a talking tree will say, "Hey, there is a Jew hiding behind me. Muslim, come and get him." Okay, so that will hopefully trigger the Third World War and bring everything to an end. And then everything in their cosmology started with a snake talking to Adam and Eve. Okay, so this is the very interesting thing. So now, uh, so what is this original sin? So original sin actually is the acquisition of discriminating knowledge. So that's the innocence which the
Hmm.
Christian theology says is
Mhm.
sinful, and hence from which you have to be redeemed. Okay, so this is an excellent segue. You asked the most pertinent question because uh, if you want to understand what is the very fundamental difference between Hinduism and Christianity, in one word, it's original sin. Because in Hinduism, whether you take Advaita Vedanta or Sankhya or any other darshana in Hinduism, the entire idea is acquire gyan. Okay, so
Yeah.
so vidya is the process, through which you overcome avidya. So you acquire gyan, and then that from where leads you to the state of paramarthika, self-realization, and everything. Okay, so Hinduism encourages you to overcome illusory knowledge, ignorance, everything, and acquire knowledge. And in Christianity, acquisition of this discriminating knowledge is the sin, is the original sin. Okay? So that's where it starts. Okay, so from the Christian perspective, uh, the 27 books of New Testament are very crucial because that's where the story of Jesus begins and ends, and all the
Which are
precept.
these 27, if I may ask?
So these are the various epistles of Paul, the Acts, the Gospels, then the book of Revelation, and all of these things. Okay, so all of these things put together, there are 27 of these books, and these are the ones that contain the narratives of Jesus, and we'll touch upon that a little bit. And because outside of the New Testament, you know so little about Jesus from the contemporary period, or even for the first 120, 130, or even I would say until 150 CE or so, we know very little about Jesus from outside sources. Okay, so uh, so hence these 27 books tell you the story of Jesus, and even that's not a full story. We'll come to that also in a couple of minutes, but they also make prophecies for the future. Okay, that's the second coming of Jesus. So so this is the basic, and now where do we begin to how do you begin to understand Christianity? So one good way of understanding Christianity is to take a very rational approach, because Christianity did not arise in a void. It came into existence 2000 years ago in what we call Judea or Israel or Palestine, however we want to call it. So it comes into existence in that area uh, first as a Jewish only sect. Okay, it arises among the Jews. And why does it even come into existence? So for that, we have to go back to roughly about 100 years or so before the Common Era started. Okay, so Common Era started according to the Christian belief when Jesus was born. That's why they call it AD and BC. Okay, before Christ, and
No, I think commonly it starts with when Jesus was baptized.
when he was
So
baptized. Correct. So it's the era of Jesus, right? So that's what
that
they
is the era
they
of
want.
Jesus.
So so
So that
what
is
they
when he was 4 years old, I think.
Correct, correct. So in the case of Christianity, the common era starts with Jesus. Okay, so but if you want to understand why at all Christianity came to existence, you have to go about 100 years back. So to the Old Testament, and within Old Testament, there is particularly a book called the Book of Daniel. And this Book of Daniel is very interesting because it is concerned with a lot of things that will happen, the return of the Messiah who will save the Jews. And there is an excellent book called the Jewish Bible, I think that's the name of the book. It's written by Professor Daniel Boyarin. He taught at UC Berkeley. He wrote about this book. And then it writes about the commentaries that were written on the book of Daniel around 100 BCE, and in which they start prophesying the coming of the Messiah. But why? The reason was uh, Israel at that time was colonized by the Romans, and they were having constant warfare, right? So the Jewish people were trying to overthrow the Romans, and it was not easy because the Romans are powerful, and their legends are all over uh, Judea or Israel, and it was difficult for them to overthrow. But then it was also a very restive population. The Jews would all the time tried to go up in arms against the Romans, and this was happening all the time. And this all culminated around the time the book of Daniel and its commentaries were written, when they started prophesying the coming of the Messiah, who will overthrow the foreign powers and will initiate the Jewish rule. So that was their entire belief. Okay, so uh, it starts around that time, and then there were many, many claimants. In fact, when you read the writings of Josephus and others, he talks about many persons by the name Yeshua or Jesus. Okay, so who appeared around that time. So numerous prophets came, and each one of them claimed that he was the Messiah that has been prophesied in the Old Testament, and Jesus happened to be one of the many that made the same claims. Okay, so uh, now we have this background. Why at all this belief in the Messiah, and then the Messiah will come and overthrow the Romans and everything? Why at all it came into existence? It's because of the Roman occupation, and there were many of them that came, and Jesus was just one of them. We could say even inevitable, because everybody was responding to the same foreign occupying force. That's when it comes into existence. Okay. So now the question is, was there really a historical Jesus? Okay, was he born in 4 BCE, and then did he live for 32 years and die? uh, Here is the very interesting part. If you were to write a biography of someone like Swami Vivekananda, or even Mohandas Gandhi, or any one of them, uh, what even after they became famous, right? Let's say Gandhi has become a very famous person, and then you are a journalist writing a biography of Gandhi. The way it will start is, yes, his all the events from his life when he became very famous would take probably most of the biography, but you would also recount a lot of incidents from the time his childhood. He's going to the UK for studying, barrister law and all these things. His time in South Africa, everything. So let's say he lived for 70 plus years, then you would cover events from throughout his life. But when you look at New Testament, what do you find? You start with nativity stories. Those are the stories of the miraculous birth of Jesus. Okay? So the Virgin Mary becomes pregnant. Now uh, she's not married. She's still a virgin. Okay, and then how did she become pregnant? So she's only betrothed to Joseph. Then the story goes, um, she was impregnated through the agency of the Holy Ghost, and hence miraculously Jesus is born. Okay, and then comes to the story of the three magi, okay, or the maga, who are the um, uh, would have been the Zoroastrian equivalent of the maga brahmanas. Okay, so they go there, and then the entire story is full of magical thinking, because they follow the star and they keep walking towards Bethlehem and all these things. So that's the nativity story. It just stops there. Okay, you hear nothing about Jesus until he turns around 12 or so, when he's a very precocious adolescent youth, and he is challenging the priests in the temple in Jerusalem. Okay, just one incident, that's it. And again, you hear nothing about Jesus till he turns 28 or so. When he meets John the Baptist, then he gets, baptized by John the Baptist in the river Jordan, where he spends 40 days in the desert, everything. Then he finally comes back, and then the Garden of Gethsemane and all of those events, right? Then finally Jesus gets crucified. Now, when you look at it, all of these events are belonging only to the last, let's say, 1 to 1.5 years of his life. This is very strange. Okay, so because this is not how hagiography works. Especially religious followers, when they write hagiographic stories of a person they are following, a religious leader, they try to pack a lot of details, but you hear nothing about Jesus except a nativity story, which is just a small fiction anyone could have written. Then one passing incident when he is around 12 years of age in the temple. Okay, just one back and forth done, and you hear nothing about Jesus, and all the events are only from the last 1.5 years of his life. That itself should give a pass to everyone, and make everyone think: are we looking at a fictional character, or are we looking at a historical character?
Right. So this actually इफ यू ड्रॉ पैरेलल, इसको देखें अगर कंपेयर करें इंडियन स्क्रिप्चर्स से, तो इंडियन स्क्रिप्चर्स में भी बहुत सारी ऐसी स्टोरीज हैं, बट देन इंडियन स्क्रिप्चर्स दे मेक एन अलाउंस, दे से कि भाई जैसे वैदिक निरुक्त, वेदांग निरुक्त, निरुक्त में ये आता है कि हर मंत्र का या हर श्लोक के 3 अर्थ हो सकते हैं। 3 अर्थ हो सकते हैं, जो आदि भौतिक, आदि दैविक और आध्यात्मिक, और अकॉर्डिंग टू द नेचर ऑफ द पर्सन। तो वो उसमें जो है, अगर आप ये गांधारी के 100 पुत्र कैसे हुए वो वाली स्टोरी अगर डालें, तो अनदर इंटरप्रिटेशन इज पॉसिबल। लेकिन बाइबल में तो ओनली वन इंटरप्रिटेशन इज पॉसिबल।
एब्सोल्युटली। इन दोनों में और एक
ये जो
वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट फर्क,
एपिस्टेमोलॉजिकल जो मैं बात कर रहा हूँ, दैट इज द
नहीं नहीं,
एपिस्टेमोलॉजिकल।
आपने बिल्कुल सही बात किया। इन दोनों में और एक बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट फर्क है। ओके, सो Rajiv Malhotra, I think, made this distinction really well. He calls it history centricity. Okay, because for Christianity, historical context and the historical basis of Christianity, Jesus, his crucifixion, everything is non-negotiable. Okay, so for example, if you take the first Corinthians, in which Paul writes in the Bible, the Corinthians is one of the books of the Bible, in which Paul writes, uh, Jesus died for our sins, he was crucified and then resurrected, and if this is not true, our faith is in vain. Okay,
Okay.
so this is
So the faith is really on a very slippery ground.
on very slippery ground. But now this is the beauty for people like us, because generally religions don't give you one falsifiable criteria and throw a challenge at you. Okay, so only two religions do these things in a very funny way: Christianity and Islam. Right? Islam says, you know, if anyone has, if this book was not revealed by Allah, you would be able to produce something like that, and it throws a challenge open to you. And there are people who have returned, right? The surahs like Allah's, okay, surahs like Quran. People have written those things. Now, uh, Christianity goes one step further. Okay, Paul says Jesus died for our sins. He was crucified, and then he resurrects. He was resurrected. And if this is not true, our faith is in vain. Okay, so that means if we can falsify this claim, which I think is very easy to do, because someone dying and getting resurrected 3 days later, and all of these things are entirely impossible. These are just magical thinking. But we can go even further beyond, and then point out, like I earlier mentioned, in the entire hagiography of Jesus, which is contained in the New Testament, all you have is uh, all the incidents are coming from only the last 1 to 1.5 years of Jesus's life. So that itself makes you wonder whether this is a real historical character or not. However, there have been many other very interesting data points that tell you that probably a historical Jesus never existed. Okay, the first one is the references. Okay, so what kind of references were made to Christianity and Jesus in the first, let's say, 100 years of time? Okay, so take a few examples. Uh, Pliny the Younger, he lived in the late part of the first century, and towards and dies towards the early part of second century. And then he mentions Christians in a book he wrote in 112 CE. But beyond that, there is no other mention of Jesus or anyone. So all we can say from that is, yes, by around 112 CE, Christianity as a religion had come into existence. Okay, but go back to other previous writers. Take Suetonius. Suetonius was a writer who lived in roughly around the time of Jesus. Okay, and he wrote extensively around the time of Jesus, and he also wrote in the reign of Caligula, the Roman emperor. So he writes about a Jewish riot right in Rome that was led by a person named Chrestus. Okay, so again, who this Chrestus is, we do not know. But obviously, Jesus, even according to the New Testament, did not go to Rome or lead a riot or any of these things. So this Chrestus cannot be Jesus Christ. Okay, so but then he talks about that as a Jewish riot. Okay, so which means even until that time, uh, they were looking at the Jewish people and not at the Christian people, indulging in this kind of rioting and other things against the Roman Emperor. So same thing. And when you look at Tacitus, this is probably something a lot of people have heard about. He Tacitus wrote around 120 or 125 CE, and then he wrote extensively about one incident from the reign of Nero that had happened about 55, 60 years ago, when there was a persecution of Christians by Emperor Nero. Okay, so in fact, that's why you have this common saying that Nero was playing the fiddle when Rome burned, right? So, and of course, there is not even an evidence that Nero was present in Rome when Rome burned. But then uh, the belief that came into existence later on was that Nero persecuted them, but uh, Tacitus makes a mention of that. Okay, so he was persecuted by Nero, but over a period of time, we know now that this entire reference was almost certainly a forgery. Okay, and because the reason we know that is Justin Martyr, who was another Christian writer. He writes around 130, 140 CE. He writes extensively about all the persecutions and martyrdom, but makes no mention of Nero's persecution of Christians. Okay, and same thing with Origen. Origen writes a lot about other persecutions, but makes no mention of this persecution of Christians by Nero. So most likely this did not happen. So all we have a few references to Christians, but none whatsoever to Jesus. But even then, the references to Christians all come only in the second century, but none of them come in the first century. And just one more point before I will let you ask more questions is that Celsus. Celsus was a philosopher who wrote around 170 CE or so. He he's one of the most vicious and blunt critics of Christianity, uh, but he is still not aware of the existence of four gospels. And
Okay.
the first time we hear about the four gospels is from the writings of the Bishop of Lyon, Irenaeus, around 175, 180 CE onwards. Okay, so in other words, we have so many of these contemporary writers, Greco-Roman writers, who recorded everything. They make no mention of Jesus. They mention nothing about a new Messiah coming and then revealing all of these gospels and all of these things, and none of those things are mentioned. Then Josephus writes around 90 CE or so. He writes about the Jewish war between the Romans and the Jews, makes no mention of Jesus. Okay, there are two references that are attributed to uh, Josephus. Both of those are forgery, but we can. I'm happy to talk about those things. But bottom line is, none of the contemporary writers even make a mention of Jesus, and uh, there is even the one hagiographers of Jesus who compiled the Gospels mention nothing about the life events of Jesus except what allegedly happened the last 1 to 1.5 years. Okay, so all of these are now indications to us that historical Jesus may not have existed, but I am more than happy to present even more arguments on why it was just a mythical character. कोई
ओके,
सवाल है तो आप
चलिए।
पूछिए, so that it doesn't become monologue from my side.
ये तो बड़ा इंटरेस्टिंग है कि कोई कंटेम्प्रेरी राइटर था नहीं। ये तो इसी तरह का जैसे इस्लाम में जो अभी आज की स्टडीज़ होती हैं, उनके बारे में पता चलता है कि भाई जो जो पहली कुरान है, जो द फर्स्ट कुरान इज़ फाउंड ओनली इन द ईयर 694। और अब तो अब काफ़ी एविडेंस इस तरह की आ गई है कि शायद ये पूरा का पूरा जो है ये रेट्रोफिट किया गया था।
Yeah.
वो जो आपका उमैयद सुल्तान था,
Mhm.
अब्दुल मलिक।
Abdul Malik जब
ये
आया,
हाँ,
in fact, my own favorite theory, I think, आपने रॉबर्ट स्पेंसर को भी एक बार होस्ट किया था ना,
जी हाँ, कई
so
बार
yeah,
किया,
yeah,
नंबर ऑफ टाइम्स।
right. So Robert Spencer also makes this good, alluring suggestion that the first verses of Quran were actually inscribed on the Dome of Rock, okay, by Abdul Malik, okay, before they made it to the Quran.
Quite right, quite
Yeah.
right, quite right. And you have so many other evidences. The Qibla,
Hmm.
what you know, the
The
Qibla,
direction of Qibla in the first
the
mosque.
direction
Yeah.
of Qibla till the first time you find it towards Mecca is only in the 720s.
Yeah. Right.
The 720s is almost 100 years
Yeah.
after the Hijrat,
Yeah.
almost 90,
Yeah.
98 years after the
622
exile,
says okay, then
the
720.
self-exile of Muhammad.
Yeah.
तो सिमिलरली यहाँ पे भी दिख रहा है कि 100-150 साल तक, बल्कि आप तो कह रहे हैं कि टिल अबाउट 170-180 देयर इज नो
Right.
मेंशन ऑफ जीसस.
There is no mention of Jesus. There is no real mention of any of these gospels, etc. In the let's say all the way up to 170 CE. Okay, and then uh, it doesn't only end there, right? So uh, uh, lot of the early church writers, okay, these are the Gnostics, right? So and then they were living. Basilides is one example. Okay, so then Felix. Okay, so all of these writers, they lived in the early part of the second century, and they all repeatedly maintain that no, Jesus was not crucified, he was not killed. Okay, so and it was just an illusion. So because for most of them, the dying and rising Messiah is not even a, a Jewish idea, it is actually a pagan idea. Okay, so this idea is borrowed, and then it is fitted on top of a Jewish belief, and then they are all denying that. They say no, Jesus was not crucified and he was not killed. But there is another reason too. What kind of person got crucified in those days? Crucifixion was the punishment for treason, for rebelling against the Roman Empire. So they did not reserve it for anyone and everyone. It was reserved for those Jews who were rebelling against the Roman Empire, and who were the Sicari and others who were carrying out armed struggle against the Roman Empire. They were the ones who were crucified. And crucifixion was problematic from a Jewish perspective because one, uh, in the entire Jewish tradition, the desecration of the dead person is one of the worst thing possible. Okay? That's why I don't know whether you're aware. There is allegedly a Jesus family tomb in Israel. Okay, आप मुझे जरा याद दिलवा दीजिए. Okay, so that I don't forget that thread, and I will talk about that. Okay, so
यस यस
उसमें भी
यस,
थोड़ा
वो
मजा
तो वो
आएगा
तो
आपको.
है ना, वो मैरी मैगदलीन एंड ऑल दैट.
नहीं नहीं, वो बात छोड़ ये उससे भी ज्यादा स्पाइसी है ये. Okay, and then
अच्छा.
it's called so this is even more interesting. Okay, so but I'll come to that. But now what happens, um, so for the Jewish people, so I mentioned the tomb because there is an alleged tomb of Jesus. Okay,
यस
right in
यस.
right in Jerusalem, over which apartment buildings have been built. Okay, and the Orthodox Jewish rabbis will not allow you to excavate the tomb because it's desecration of dead people. Okay, so that's a very serious thing in Judaism. And crucifixion desecrated the human when he was alive and when he was dead. So what they did, they will put the person on a cross on a tree. They call it the tree, and then the person will be hanging for days, sometimes weeks. Okay, so and then they died. Contrary to the popular belief, they were not driving nails into the wrist or palm or any of those things. Okay, so the main thing was they'll tie the legs, and then they'll tie your hands, and then your thorax, your thoracic cavity now will have to do all the lifting. You cannot breathe, it becomes very difficult for you to breathe. So these people will get slowly asphyxiated, okay, over a long period of time. That's how they died. And then the birds will come and peck at them, and then they'll be thirsting, they cannot get water. It's the most horrendous form of death. And when somebody died, they won't even bring the body down immediately. Sometimes they will let it rot there as a message to everyone. Okay, so this is what will happen if you rebel against Rome. And finally, when they bring it down, they'll just throw it into a pit. Okay, they won't give it a burial. Okay, they'll throw it into a pit where there is a Catholic academic and professor by name John Dominic Crossan. He writes about that. Yeah, if Jesus had been crucified and brought down, they would have thrown his body into a pit, an open pit, where a lot of other criminals would have been thrown in, and dogs and others would have pounced on it. They would have tore at the corpse, eaten it. This is the worst way to desecrate a dead person. Okay, so but uh, whereas what you find is you have this story of Jesus getting crucified, which would have been the most humiliating thing for the early Christians to wear on their sleeve and go about and teach. But the reason they did was the story of dying and rising Messiah or Savior was very common in pagan religions. Okay, and don't forget that Rome or the Greco-Roman region at that time was dominated by pagan religions when Christianity comes into existence. And there is an excellent book by Professor Alan Dundes. Okay, he also taught at UC Berkeley, and
Alan
then Alan Dundes.
Dundies.
Yeah,
Okay.
Dundes. Okay. So, what's the name of his book? Let me bring up. It's almost 10 years since I wrote the book. Yeah, it's called The Hero Pattern and the Life of Jesus. Okay. Uh, so, it is part of an anthology called In Quest of Hero. Okay. I will send you the name and all the details, but it's also in
Okay.
the electronic copy of the book you have it with you. Okay. So, Alan Dundes comes up with what he calls a template of uh, a savior. Okay, so there are 24, 25 such characteristics he lists. Okay, and those are like he is born of a virgin, and this person is killed, crucifixion or by some other form of death. This person gets killed, and then this person gets resurrected and comes back. And uh, different uh, uh, pagan gods are scored on this parameter. Some score 16 out of 24, 17 out of 24, etc. I think Jesus scores the maximum out of those. I think he gets something like 22 out of 24 or 25. Okay. So these are common myths that were in circulation in the Greek and Roman world. But now to sell the story of Christianity, the story of Jesus in the Greco-Roman world, they adopt this story, and now Jesus becomes the Messiah who's created using these mythical constructs.
ये लॉजिक मेरे समझ में नहीं आता है, ये जो लॉजिक बताते हैं कि साहब कि जीसस डाइड सो दैट यू कुड बी सेव्ड, ये क्या, मेरे तो बिल्कुल ही समझ में नहीं आता है कि कोई आदमी मर के आपको कैसे बचा सकता है। ये तो बड़ा कॉमन सी चीज़ है कि भाई ये सब लोग कहते हैं आजकल, इनफैक्ट बॉलीवुड में तो कई बार ये तो बड़ा कॉमन सा डायलॉग है कि अ, कि कोई भी बैटल या कोई भी लड़ाई जो है, वो मर के नहीं जीती जाती, मार के जीती जाती। तो ये क्या फिलॉसफी है, इसका क्या ओरिजिन है? ये कैसे कह दिया गया कि भाई ही डाइड सो दैट यू कुड बी सेव्ड? अब हाउ डू यू सेव एवरीबॉडी? पहले तो वो ओरिजिनल सिन वाली बड़ी अजीब-सी बात है। आपको नॉलेज आ गई, तो आप जो है वो पापी हो गए, और वो जो है उसने मर के आपको पाप से बचा लिया। मैं एब्सोल्युटली आई हैव नॉट बीन एबल टू मेक अ हेड एंड टेल आउट ऑफ दिस लॉजिक। सो प्लीज़ एनलाइटन मी।
In fact, no one can make head and tail out of this, and you should not, even search for logic in these kind of Christian stories because, uh, to start with, uh, when they went and said, right, you acquire discriminating knowledge, and that's original sin, and you have to redeem from that. In any sane society, people would have said, uh, everything you're saying is strange. It's the inversion of truth or what we desire to be good traits in human beings, but that did not happen. So uh, same thing. So why did Jesus die? Okay, so then because looking at the perspective, this is something uh, John Dominic Crossan, then Robert Price and others, they talk about that at length. So Jesus claimed that he was the Messiah. Okay, in the New Testament, according to the New Testament. Okay, so he says, I am the Messiah, and he comes on the day of Passover, which is the most important festival for the Jews. He comes riding on a donkey and a shoal into Jerusalem. Okay, he's starting trouble. Then he enters the temple. He overturns the table where the money changers are, exchanging currency, which is a religious duty for them because Jews came from around the world. They had different currencies, Some had denarii, some had shekel, and all of these things. How will they come and make sacrifice? How will they buy some, goat or something and make a sacrifice? They need local money changes. But Jesus goes and creates a ruckus. Okay. Then uh, he instigates his followers, Peter and others, to take all your money, go and buy swords, so that he can now go and fight the Romans. Okay, and all of this is now completely delusional, because you cannot go and take on the biggest armed forces of the planet at the time, the Roman legends, with a ragtag army of a dozen people or so. Okay, you cannot do that. But then that's what he's instigating, and uh, then he is asked, okay, are you the king of Jews? Okay, and then he responds with a smirk, you said so. Okay, and then finally he's put on the cross, he's crucified, and he dies. Now, uh, all of this, if someone was a follower of Jesus and they thought, this guy is born of a virgin, he has had a miraculous birth, he's son of God, and he's the new Messiah, he's going to save all of us, all of those followers would have been in a state of shock. How can this happen? Okay. And then they have to come up with two excuses. One excuse was, by the way, he died for our sins. Okay. So, instead of, this guy foolishly started right against the Romans and he got killed, it's now, no, no, he actually died for our sins. So let's be thankful to him. Okay. Then the second one, and even though he was crucified and he was buried, he was resurrected. He came back 3 days later, and 500 of us saw him, and all these things. Those are the stories that happen in New Testament. So, what is happening now
Yeah, so
is,
if he did resurrect, why did he go back to heaven?
oh, because there is going to be a second coming. Okay. Uh, Tabi maza start hoga. So, for all the infidels, because when he comes
हाँ,
back, so these are all beautifully narrated in the book of Revelation in the New Testament. Okay. So, when,
एक इसमें थोड़ा सा और कंफ्यूजन है कि भाई हमारे यहाँ अवतार का कॉन्सेप्ट है।
hmm,
अब अवतार का
Sambhavami Yuge
कॉन्सेप्ट है
Yuge, and then that is for establishing Dharma.
इट्स फॉर एस्टैब्लिशिंग धर्म। तो ये वो भी धर्म है, उसका ओरिजिनल सिन को हटाना उसके लिए उसका धर्म है।
नहीं,
तो वो
उसमें थोड़ा,
हमारे यहाँ अवतार जो आता है, अवतार जो मैंने उसका एनालिसिस किया हुआ है, आई हैव रिटन, आई एम राइटिंग अ कृष्णा ट्रिलॉजी,
yeah,
2 books have been written. The third one is now under process. तो आफ्टर अ लॉट ऑफ थिंकिंग मैंने एक अवतार का, बिकॉज़ व्हाट आई वाज डूइंग इज़ दैट मैं इसको इंटरप्रेट कर रहा था एट द ग्रॉस लेवल, आदि भौतिक जिसको बोलते हैं। तो पूरी की पूरी जो कृष्ण लीला है उसको आदि भौतिक लेवल पे इंटरप्रेट, यानी इंटेलेक्चुअलाइजिंग द स्टोरी बेसिकली,
right.
bringing it down to the level of the intellect, not from the divine perspective or from the spiritual perspective. तो उसमें मैंने उसको अवतार को डिफाइन किया कि भाई अवतार आर those liberated beings who have the option to completely liberate and sublimate themselves,
Right.
but they choose to stay on in the world in order to establish dharma. So that is what you would have Maryada Purushottam Ram or a Yogeshwar Krishna.
और इवन
तो
जीवन
हमारे
मुक्ता.
यहाँ तो जो अवतार है वो पूरी तरह से सक्षम होने पर भी वो धरती पर रहना, अपना एक धर्म को स्थापित करने के लिए एक ऑप्शन के रूप में एक्सरसाइज करते हैं, इसलिए वो अवतार कहलाते हैं। एंड हियर इज वन हु सेज कि नहीं, आई एम गोइंग एंड आई विल कम बैक,
Yeah.
देन आई विल सी यू।
So, our avatars compared to Jesus are, I would say, quite boring. Okay. So, क्योंकि देखिए,
दैट्स अ न्यू पर्सपेक्टिव।
so so जितने भी हमारा avatars है, they are too intellectual. Okay. So what is Krishna doing? Krishna is avatar. Okay. कुरुक्षेत्र में युद्ध हो रही है. Okay, and then right in the middle of the battlefield, Arjuna says, okay, do I need to fight, and all these things, and Krishna gets into serious discourse. Okay, 700 verses. Okay, uh, uh, everything about Swadharma and all of these things. Why does he have to fight? What is his duty? What will be the consequences of not fighting? And what does Dharma look like? Everything. Okay, उसको विश्वरूप दर्शन देने के लिए भी 11 chapters वेट करना पड़ता है उसमें. Okay,
Hmm.
so
Hmm.
there is no entertainment there. Okay, so it is too intellectual, and only a few people will be listening to them. But जीसस का जो सेकंड कमिंग है, okay, that is very very exciting. Okay, so एक बार तो क्रूसीफाई कर दिया. Okay, then they threw him into mass grave or a mass pit. Okay, so that would have been quite ruinous to Jesus and his followers, assuming he all existed. Okay, so then Jesus promises, I will return. Okay, so and he what will happen when he returns? So this narrative is there in the book of Revelation, okay, in the New Testament, in the Bible. So it says Jesus will return, and first 5 months though he will create so much of ruckus on planet Earth. Okay, so he will kill all the non-believers, but for 5 months
Hmm.
he will first torture us. Okay,
Hmm.
waterboarding करेगा वो क्या करेगा मुझे मालूम नहीं है, but then he will torture us for about 5 months. Okay, after this 5 months of torture is over, he will kill us. Then he will load us onto uh, you know, uh, put us on the hell-bound cargo because we are all going to hell. Okay, will send us to hell. Then there they will torture. Jesus will torture us for eternity. Okay,
Hmm.
and the most famous philosopher, quote within quote philosopher of Christendom, Thomas Aquinas. Okay, so Aquinas says one of the greatest pleasures of a Christian is to watch from heaven the torment of the infidel in hell. Okay, so
Oh.
Jesus is coming back. When the second coming of Jesus happens, it's going to be full of fireworks. Okay, so जो आपने हमास का देखा October 7th में, okay, they went,
Hmm.
they killed like, probably 3-4 thousand Hamas guys. They went inside and they killed about 1,200 Jews. Okay, so this is going to be even more dramatic. This is one Jesus. Okay, he will show up. Okay, with a double-edged sword. Okay, jetting out of his mouth. Okay, then वो तो फिर को सिर को हिलाते हिलाते कैसे मारेगा मुझे मालूम नहीं है, but then that's how he will go and kill. Okay, it's a low tech mass murder that he will carry out.
Hmm.
But the irony is, in the New Testament, Jesus also says to his audience, this generation will not pass before the Son of Man comes again. Meaning, the second coming will happen before you all die. Okay, so let's be very generous. Let's say those days a generation meant 27 or 30 years. Okay, give it 30 years. Okay, I'm being generous, right? So, because I think the longevity then was probably maybe around 40, 45 years, not more than that. So, but Jesus says, I'll return in your own lifetime. He did not.
Hmm.
So that's why since then Christians have been
And the
postponing.
date of the apocalypse keeps getting shifted.
It gets shifted. Okay, just in the last, like in my book I summarize all the dates that I proposed just in the last 25, 30 years. Okay, so they keep on shifting it, and every time something like a full rounded number like year 2000 comes, they go berserk. Okay, year 2000 has come, and then now
Hmm.
Jesus is coming.
And then he doesn't come.
He doesn't come, and sometimes it also provides a lot of comic relief. Okay, so around 1997 क्या हुआ था. So here is the thing. Okay, so Judaism and all the Talmudic texts and other things, the commentaries that are Torah commentaries that are written, they all come up with three conditions for the return of the Messiah. Okay, condition number one: a red heifer cow, a red cow without any blemish should be born, and then that cow should be sacrificed, okay, burnt alive, and then the ash mixed with water and then sprinkled, and then the temple of Jerusalem should be rebuilt, okay, and then consecrated with this water. Okay, then the Messiah will return. So for a long time, Jewish people and Christians have been crazily searching for this pure red cow without a blemish. Okay, ये मैं joke नहीं कर रहा हूँ. There is a very good book which I also reference in my book by Goran Gershenberg. Okay, he writes about all of those things at length, providing all the references. In the US, in some of the European countries, they even have farms where they are raising cows in the hope that one day they will get this pure red cow, okay, without any blemish. 97 में ऐसा एक कौ पैदा हो गया था इसराइल में. ओके,
कब?
1997.
कहाँ
ओके,
हो गया था?
इसराइल में.
अच्छा।
ओके, उसका नाम था मेलेडी. ओके, मेलेडी द काउ. ओके, वो जब पैदा हुआ, ऑल द Jewish people and the Christians got super excited. Okay, the reason was, uh, now the Jews thought, okay, this is the step one of a threefold, path, which should be traversed before the Messiah comes. फिर तो अभी तो हमारा Jewish Messiah सच्चाई में आ जाएगा. पहले Jesus आया था, वो तो imposter, and then we are waiting for the real Messiah. He will show up. So Christians agreed with everything the Jews said until this point, except they said, by the way, Jesus is our Messiah and he is now coming back. That's the second coming. Okay, so that was the only difference between the two. But both of them wanted this to happen. And Palestinians को तो excite करना बहुत ही आसान है. Okay, so you don't have to go out of the way to excite them. But uh, this second coming of this Messiah means something more serious for them, because it means now you have to rebuild the temple. Okay, that's where, that's why you're having this cow. You're going to sacrifice. You're going to cleanse the rebuilt temple with that purified water. Then the Messiah will show up. Okay, so how will you rebuild the temple without demolishing the Al-Aqsa mosque? Okay, so they were getting excited. Okay, so
हुँ।
कुछ पैलेस्टीनियन मुस्लिम्स ने ये भी कोशिश किया था, ओके, उसको मेलेडी दैट काउ उसको मार डालें. ओके, सो द इजरायली गवर्नमेंट प्रोवाइडेड आर्म्ड सिक्योरिटी टू दैट काउ. So this drama was going on. Okay, so all the especially the evangelical preachers in America, they were running around and saying, okay, अभी आने वाला दिन है. Okay, so because now the cow had to turn 3 before it could be sacrificed. Okay, so this was perfect timing. 1997 में ये पैदा हो गया था. Around year 2000 it will turn 3. वो तो आ जाएगा, हमारा जीसस वापस आने वाला है. Okay, so they were going berserk. Okay, then Goran Gershenberg writes, okay, the world was on the brink of a precipice. Okay, at the start of World War III, because you go and destroy Al-Aqsa Mosque, all the Muslims will run on a rampage. Okay, then it's the true clash of civilization that Samuel Huntington has been predicting for a while. Okay, so but everything changed when that cow turned 18 or 19 months of age. It sprouted one white hair at the end of the tail.
ओह!
Now that was a blemish. Okay, the cow was
ओह!
let go unceremoniously. Okay, nobody cared for that cow anymore. Until this time, this cow
The
was
cow
the
was
center of
saved actually.
cow was saved. Okay, but look at all the publicity she got until she turned 18, 19 months age. Okay, the entire world was paying attention to that. Now completely forgotten, sent out. And then I have a Jewish friend. He works in Israeli Air Force. Okay, and you know uh, we became good friends during my days when I used to work in Israel in the late 90s. And he he is very reverential about this, and he joked. He said, probably it's not just one white hair, it's probably three white hairs that the cow sprouted at the end of the tail. So, if so, it's a holy trinity of white hair that saved the world from destruction in year 2000.
Okay, वेंकट जी, वी आर ऑलमोस्ट गेटिंग ऑन टू द आवर.
Yeah,
तो मैं चूँकि क्रिसमस आने वाला है, तो ये जो एक क्रिश्चियनिटी के एक ये जो बड़ी अजीब-सी बात है कि ये जो है, ये पेगन फेस्टिवल्स, पेगन कस्टम्स, इनको सबको ये प्लेजराइज़ करते हैं
yeah,
या अप्रोप्रिएट करते हैं. तो ये जो क्रिसमस की ट्रू स्टोरी क्या है और ये सांता क्लॉस क्या है?
sure, sure. So, Christmas ki true story hai. The first time Christmas itself is mentioned is in the writings of church fathers in the year 354 CE.
ओह!
Okay,
ओह!
they write a letter
ओह! आफ्टर द फर्स्ट काउंसिल.
आफ्टर द फर्स्ट काउंसिल. ओके, सो उसके बाद काउंसिल तो 325 में हो गया, उसके बाद ऑलमोस्ट
हाँ.
30 years. Okay, so
हुँ.
they write a letter in which they say, they reference the celebration of the birth of Jesus. They don't mention the exact date. Okay, क्योंकि there are places where, because of the different calendars and other things, it's celebrated on January 7th and all that stuff. And Bart Ehrman also mentions, I forgot where, it was also celebrated somewhere in April as well. Okay, so anyway, they don't mention the exact date when it was celebrated. They said once such celebration took place in 336 CE. Okay, even that is good 11 years after the Council of Nicaea. Okay, so that's when they claim the first Christmas was celebrated and the birth of Jesus was celebrated. Okay, so which is very strange because if really a historical Jesus existed, okay, his birthday, especially it was a magical birth, okay, he was born to a virgin, okay, उसमें थोड़ा spicy detail तो before we close we should definitely spend 2-3 minutes on that, okay, उसका जो
Yes,
family
yes.
tomb के बारे में, but
Mm,
or we can make the family tomb a separate discussion too, okay, that is a very exciting discussion, okay,
mm.
so your choice, but what happens here
नहीं,
is
नहीं,
Jesus.
आप इसी में कंप्लीट कर लेते हैं.
चलो
ठीक है, we can
कंप्लीट करेंगे इसमें.
go
Okay,
another
so
10 minutes also.
हाँ, ठीक है. So look at this. Jesus had a miraculous birth. Okay, he was conceived by a virgin. Okay, and then his father initials जिसने इसको initials दिया, that's none other than God, the sky god of Judaism and Christianity. Yet the Christians did not celebrate his birthday. The first time they all of a sudden remembered us in 354, they remembered, oh, by the way, 18 years back we celebrated his first birthday. Okay, this is extremely strange. Okay, so that's when it is first celebrated. But where and why? Okay, so this celebration happens in the Greco-Roman world. Okay, not in Judea. Okay, you will expect, if you think of something like Krishna Janmashtami, it is celebrated Pom in Mathura. It's celebrated everywhere in India. But then, if you had to show up in one place to participate in that, you will travel to Mathura. You will go to Vrindavan on that day, right? And then, uh, uh, so, but it was not celebrated in Judea anywhere. Not in Jerusalem, not in Bethlehem, nowhere in Judea. Okay, it's celebrated for the first time in the Roman Empire. Okay, so but why? The reason is it was the summer solstice. Sorry, it was a winter solstice festival for those people. It's very similar to how we celebrate Sankranti, Pongal in India, right? So that's when the winter comes to an end, and then so the same thing there, and also they called it the Latin name they used was Dies Natalis Invicti, okay, meaning uh, uh, the birthday of the unconquered sun. Sun as in Surya Devata. Okay, so they were worshipping sun. That's why the sun was also printed on a lot of their coins, and then they had it. So this was celebrated at that time. It was a massive festival, and just like all the agrarian people will be celebrating Sankranti and Pongal with great indulgence. All the Greco-Roman people are celebrating the same thing because Mediterranean region was famous for agriculture. Then Mitra. So, in the Indo-Iranian traditions, just like we have the Vedic Mitra, okay, Mitra was also a deity in the Iranian tradition. That's why you hear about the religion of Mithraism, which comes up and then spreads all the way into the Roman Empire. And hence, the Mitra Jayanti was also celebrated on this day, 25th of December. So Christians come and then they ban a lot of religions, including Mithraism, including the pagan religions. And then kya kare? So those people are celebrating the festivals, and the Christians said, "All right, you continue to celebrate. Uska naam zara badal denge." Okay, so but then you can continue to have the same functions. Okay, so they do the same thing in India. Okay, so people, if they think this is a strange thing, okay, they should just visit any Catholic school in India. Okay, so what they will do, they'll celebrate Diwali, but what they will do is they'll call it the festival of lights. Okay, there will not be any mention of Shri Ram, okay, Narakasura, none of these things. Okay, they will just talk about festival of lights. Okay, and then they will also introduce the Christmas carols and all these things into that. Okay, so that's what they do. So that's exactly the same thing they did 2000 years ago, or rather 1700 years ago, I would say.
And who is this good Samaritan? Santa Claus, the
So
Saint
Santa Claus.
Nicholas.
So uh, Coinrad Ernst wrote a very, very good paper. Okay, so about the various things Christianity borrowed from Hinduism, Buddhism, and a lot of other pagan religions. And in that, he also touches upon uh, Vodon and Santa Claus. Okay, so the Christian story is in what we call Turkey today, or Anatolia in those days, there was a person by name Nicholas, okay, who then becomes a saint. He goes through the canonization process. he becomes a saint. He's the patron saint. So Christians, especially the Catholic Church, had this uh, big forgery mill, the Holy Forgery Mill. Its job was to manufacture saints everywhere in the world. Okay, so
Mm,
for
mm,
example, some 7th century merchant comes to India from Iran or Turkey or something. His name is Thomas. Then he becomes Saint Thomas. Okay, a disciple of Jesus and all these things. So they have this habit of manufacturing in their Holy Forgery mills stories of saints who become patron saints of different parts of the world. And one such manufactured fictional character was Nicholas from Turkey. So then he becomes Saint Nicholas, then Santa Claus. Okay, but in all likelihood, the reality was this was a Nordic god by name Wodan. Okay, so this Wodan is a Nordic god who had been very famous, and as Christianity starts to spread from the core Roman Empire to the rest of the world, especially Northern Europe and other things, you have these Germanic tribes. Okay, now they are getting converted. Okay, to Christianity, so something like 1,000 years, 1,100, 1100 years ago, etc. So now you have to bring in their beliefs also and incorporate that into Christianity. So that's why this gets up.
yeah, otherwise also there's supposed to be a certain Saint Nicholas who was a barbarous character and who would go around breaking temples and who would
Yeah,
persecute people
yeah.
and who would bear gifts to the
Uh,
converted,
all,
to the
all,
children of the
all
converted.
yes, and all of these saints are barbarous characters, right? So like Saint Xavier, he wanted Inquisition in India, so none of them is
Yeah.
a good character. They are barbarous. Okay, yes, and but that's why
In,
they become saints.
including the latest Saint Teresa.
Oh, Teresa is the most obnoxious. Okay, in fact, I wrote an article called Teresa, the Eichmann of Kolkata, like Adolf Eichmann, the Nazi.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
he derived pleasure out of others' suffering. Okay, she did the same thing. Even if she had a small viral flu or anything, she will go to All India Institute of Medical Sciences or to Johns Hopkins and other places, the expensive hospitals around the world. But then for her patients, whenever they showed up, she'll say, okay, Jesus loves you, that's why you're suffering from pain. So she was you know
Mhm.
having moments of
Yes,
shade on Friday,
Christopher
enjoying.
Hitchens has uncovered a lot of things about him as
Oh
well.
yeah, yeah. And Arup Chatterjee did even a better job than Hitchens on that. Hitchens is brilliant when it comes to polemics, but at times he also kind of sensationalizes it more than he should. But आपको वक्त मिलेगा तो आप अरूप चैटर्जी का किताब पढ़िए. Okay, so Mother Teresa, the final verdict. That's a far more balanced book. In fact, it his research was one of the inputs for Christopher Hitchens.
Right.
अभी वर्जिनिटी ऑफ मेरी उसके बारे में बात करें या उसका टूम के बारे में बात करें जीसस का
I
टूम
think we'll take it the next time. I
या
think we are already at 1 hour and 10 minutes,
परफेक्ट
so I think that should be the
या इन
Virgin
दोनों में
Mary.
बात करेंगे या
Hmm, very interesting topics.
या
No,
one thing
now
we
we
can
are.
leave your audience with only one clue. Okay, uh, the Virgin Mary was twice married virgin, so you can call her the extra double Virgin Mary. Okay? ये तो किसी क्रिश्चियंस को मालूम ही नहीं होगा. ओके, मेजॉरिटी ऑफ देम डू नॉट नो अबाउट दैट. नेक्स्ट एपिसोड में हम उसके बारे में बात करेंगे. ओके, वो कितनी बार वर्जिन रही है वो. ओके, ओके, कैसे रही है, एंड ऑल ऑफ दैट स्टोरीज विल टॉक अबाउट दैट. विल ब्रिंग इट अप फ्रॉम द क्रिश्चियन सोर्सेस इटसेल्फ.
Quite right. So thank you very much, Mr. Venkat, and we will continue this series because we really need to understand why uh, Christians love us. We don't want
Absolutely.
their love, but they love us still.
Absolutely. And we should talk about everything. We should talk about all the Christian teachings also. क्योंकि what they do is they will take absolutely peripheral incidents from Hindu texts, okay, and then they will highlight that, and then they will vilify Hinduism, often taking it out of context, but uh, more importantly, absolutely peripheral stuff to vilify Hinduism, and whereas their teachings themselves are terrible. The teachings of Christianity are terrible. Okay, so we should also do that in the coming episodes. Take some of the teachings they cherish so much. Christians cherish so much.
Yeah,
They think those are great
what they
teachings.
called they have this, I think they have defined fields of study. Polemic
Yeah,
is one, and
yeah,
apologetic is another.
yeah, yeah, exactly. In fact, Christian apologetics started as a response to textual criticism in the 19th century, right? So, end part of 19th century in Tübingen and other places in Germany, scholars shredded Christianity. Then they started apologetics. But what we will do, we don't even have to have any apology for Hinduism, but we'll just take some of the teachings of Christianity, the ones like the Sermon on the Mount, which they think is a great teaching, and we can actually demonstrate those are all pretty hateful teachings.
Right, right.
In fact,
So
this
thank you very
actually
much.
was, yeah. Thank you very much. Thanks a lot
Thank
for
you very much,
inviting
Mr.
me, and
Venkat.
we'll continue talking on this.
Bye bye.
Bye bye. Dhanyavad.
Jai Hind.
Jai Hind.
Vande
Jai Hind.
Mataram.
Bye.